can't use that argument.
Yes, I can.
No, you can't.
I just said, this is now the maybe 10th time I've asked you.
Then I'll tell you you're wrong.
I'm not making a statement, I'm asking you a question.
Misinformation.
I'm not providing information, it's called the thought experiment.
No.
You think?
I don't give statements based. I don't deal in hypotheticals.
Well, we're talking about hypotheticals because when courts make rulings, they test the principle by applying it in hypothetical situations and seeing what outcomes it brings us. That is how judicial review works. That is literally how it works. So if you're providing an opinion on the courts, I'm going to use that same framework to ask you a question. Do you support Trump?
Yes, I do.
Okay, and what's the main reason you say you support him?
Border security.
Okay, would that include deportations?
Yes.
Okay, so how do you feel about his deportations that are denying due process?
I feel they are getting due process.
You feel they are?
Yes.
Wouldn't that be the decision of a court to make whether or not due process is being given?
They've already been through courts.
I'm asking you, can you answer my question?
I just did.
No, my question is, would it not be up to a court to determine whether or not they've received sufficient due process?
If they have been arrested previously, they've already had their due process.
Sufficient due process.
What does that even mean?
Enough due process.
You got to go into more
because due process can mean a host of different things. And there's different standards. Hold on. There's different standards of what kind of due process you are owed depending on the action being taken.
Expedited removal.
No, so like for Kilmar Abrego Garcia, he had a withholding of removal order. The due process would be voiding that removal order and then getting him deported through a hearing.
No.
Yes.
No.
And the Supreme Court agreed on this 9-0.
That was after he left the country.
Doesn't matter when. The Supreme Court all agreed. Even Thomas agreed. Even Thomas agreed that Abrego Garcia did not get due process.
Yes, he did.
So you disagree with the Supreme Court in every circuit court?
I think federal district judges overstepped their jurisdiction.
That's fine. Supreme Court said the same thing unanimously.
But they also supported his mass deportation.
Okay, that's again a completely different topic. So I just want to be clear that you believe you have a better understanding of the law than a unanimous Supreme Court decision.
But when it comes to immigration, you can't just quote the Constitution.
Okay, you're not addressing what I'm saying. We're going to stay granular here. We're going to stay on this topic. It's your opinion that you have a better understanding of the U.S. legal system than 9 Supreme Court justices voting in unison on Kilmar Abrego Garcia's deportation not having due process and being unjust and improper.
They haven't clarified their position.
No, they haven't clarified the remedy, but they all agreed unanimously that it was without due process and it was an illegal deportation. There's no disagreement anywhere.
If their ruling came after the plane left the country, that's where their power stops.
Really? So as long as you're off U.S. jurisdiction, courts have no power?
Exactly.
So if President Trump came right now and grabbed me, a U.S. citizen, and took me to some other country and then abused me, as long as they do that before a court finds out, totally allowed in your worldview?
He's not a U.S. citizen.
Hold on. That's not what you said, though. You just said once you're off U.S. soil, courts have no jurisdiction. That doesn't draw a distinction between whether you're a citizen or something else. So I'm going to ask you again, and this time I'd like you to respond. If I, a U.S. citizen, was sent somewhere else, a different country, not U.S. soil, and there I was abused, I was beat up, whatever, under your view, as long as that happened before a court found out, nothing wrong happened there. Because now it's just foreign policy.
Because you're a U.S. citizen. There's a difference.
No, not under your worldview. Your worldview, hold on. Correct me if I'm wrong then. You said that once you're off U.S. jurisdiction, courts have no more power.
You can't use U.S. citizens because U.S.
Answer my question.
I just did.
No, you didn't.
You don't agree with it.
No, you're not even answering my question. Is it or is it not your belief that once you are off U.S. soil, courts no longer have any jurisdiction?
Exactly.
That's your belief.
That's my belief.
Okay, notice how in that sentence, nowhere did the word citizen or illegal or anything else come up. That just means that based on your geographic location, courts will magically lose power to do anything. So under that definition, which you have just confirmed for everyone in the live, if a U.S. citizen like myself was deported somewhere else, as long as it happened before a court found out, they could not order the administration to bring me back, because as soon as I crossed the line of U.S. territory, this is now a foreign policy issue and courts no longer have any power. That is your position.
Who has power over foreign policy?
Huh?
Tell me, who has power over foreign policy?
The executive branch.
Okay, them only, or Secretary of State. No one else, not Supreme Court.
So you're agreeing with me then?
No, I'm not agreeing with you.
You just said on your own worldview that a U.S. citizen can have any of their rights violated as long as they are taken off of U.S. soil before a court finds out, because at that point, the court would have no jurisdiction over them.
U.S. citizen.
Say it again?
Your argument with that is irrelevant.
It's not.
Yes,
it's showing you why your belief system is dangerous and antithetical to the United States.
No, it's not. Because these are...
Do you believe in constitutional rights?
I quote immigration law.
Okay, again, do you believe in constitutional rights?
Of course I do.
And do you believe that the courts exist to enforce those rights when the other branches violate them?
As long as they remain neutral.
Yeah, there's a process for appointing and impeaching and stuff. Yeah, the checks and balances are built in.
I got news for you. That first federal district judge has bias. Because he has a daughter with an NGO who supports...
This is my favorite point. I love this point, and I'm going to allow you to change the subject because this is not a great thing you chose to switch to. James Boasberg, this supposedly biased judge, is the exact same judge who told Trump he didn't have to release his tax returns. He ruled in favor of Trump when Trump was sued to release his tax returns. And what is that, James Boasberg? Is that the same judge who ordered Hillary Clinton to release her emails? What a biased judge he is to be ruling in favor of Trump and against Hillary Clinton. What a corrupt judge, right?
When it comes to immigration, yes, he is biased.
Oh, so you get to pick and choose when to call him biased as long as he rules in a way that you don't like.
No, y'all support illegal, undocumented immigration. I don't.
I don't support illegal immigration.
Well, then why are you standing for it then?
I'm not standing for it. I would actually, the question is towards you. Why are you standing against the U.S. Constitution? That's the actual question here.
It's not against the U.S. Constitution. Article 2, Section 10.
Hold on. You said that courts have no authority if you're not on U.S. soil. Under your definition, a U.S. citizen can have their rights violated as long as they're first deported out of the country before a court finds out.
That's not what I said, and you know it.
No, I do know that's exactly what you said.
No.
So, okay, tell me why what I'm saying would not be possible.
Borrego Garcia, who was in his home country.
Tell me why what I'm saying would not be possible under your system.
You didn't read the bottom of that Supreme Court.
You need to respond to what I'm saying.
Go to Guatemala, not
you need to respond to what I'm saying.
So you didn't read the whole Supreme Court.
Hold on. You need to respond to what I'm saying. It was very short. I did read. It was only a few pages. You need to respond to what I'm saying.
He was not to be deported to Guatemala.
Or are you going to be sent to El Salvador? It was the withholding of removal. Hold on. First, you're just wrong on the facts. The withholding of removal was to El Salvador. Second of all, I'm going to ask you for a fifth time. Under your position, courts have no jurisdiction if you're not on U.S. soil. Why would that not apply to anyone who's not on U.S. soil and just illegal immigrants?
So how are you switching from immigration to U.S. citizens? How does that work?
You're the one that switched it because you're the one who said, you asked me, hold on, you asked me which branch of government controls foreign policy. I said the executive branch. You said exactly. Then I asked you a clarifying question. Okay, if someone's off U.S. jurisdiction, do courts no longer have jurisdiction anymore over those people? You said yes. I said, why would that not apply to a citizen then?
It's still up to the executive branch when he is outside the boundaries of this country.
I understand that that's your position.
So
I understand that that's your position. And I'm saying there's no reason. You got to let me respond, dude. I know it's not a good look for you, but you have to let me respond.
We're just going around and around in circles.
No, we're not. I'm going to ask you point blank. Do you think it would be acceptable for President Trump right now to snatch me up, a U.S. citizen, beat me up, violate my rights, but then they quickly get me off U.S. soil before the courts find out? Then the courts say, you must bring him back and you must be punished for this. But then under your logic, no, you don't understand. Now this is foreign policy. Courts don't have any jurisdiction over this because it doesn't matter if he's a citizen or something else. He's no longer on U.S. soil.
What U.S. citizens have been deported?
Address that. Do not change the subject.
What U.S. citizens have been deported?
Address that.
What U.S. citizens?
That's not my claim. Address what I said.
You just made the statement.
I gave you a hypothetical which illustrates why your position is insane. Address what I said. Then clarify. Then address what I said and clarify.
I never once said anything about American citizens. You want to talk about immigration.
It doesn't matter if you said something about American citizens. You talked about the limits of the court's power.
That's right.
And I'm saying once you get a citizen out of that limit as well, then they're also screwed.
And
under your logic.
Federal district judges
address what I said. You can't run. I'm not going to let you run. You have to address it.
Well, you're not making any sense because
Do you
you're
think-
basing on hypotheticals.
To illustrate a principle.
No,
That's
to
how law works.
justify your
That's how
position.
courts work. This is
No.
how we adjudicate stuff.
How many district courts do we have in this country?
Are you going to keep running from the question? I'm going to keep asking until you answer it.
District courts do we have in this country?
I'm going to keep asking you the question until you answer it. This is now the maybe 10th time I've asked you.
Then I'll tell you you're wrong.
I'm not making a statement. I'm asking you a question.
You're talking about American citizens, which is not the case.
Do you or do you not agree that a court's power ends where the U.S. borders end?
Yes, I do.
Why would
And
that
I've said
not?
that repeatedly.
Why would that limitation also not apply to U.S. citizens then?
Immigration
If I'm
has
on
nothing
Mexican
to do-
territory, then according to you, that's U.S. foreign policy now. Courts have no jurisdiction.
Now,
That's
if
your
US
argument.
citizens
And
are
I have, this
wrongly
is recorded.
detained
This
in
is
another
recorded.
country,
And when I
that's
go back
different.
and I take this recording, I have you saying that exact same thing that I just said.
I don't care what you do with it.
Okay, I'm letting you know that I'm using your own argument, and I'm asking you why that wouldn't apply to a citizen as well.
But we're not talking about U.S. citizens.
I'm asking you a question.
And I just answered it for you.
You did not answer. What was your
Yes, I
answer?
did.
What's your
I
answer?
said I agree
You agree with what?
that their power stops at the border of the country.
Okay,
Or
and I'm
the-
letting you know, if you agree with that, then that would also hurt citizens.
No, it wouldn't.
It would.
You can't use that argument.
Yes, I
It's
can.
wrong. No, you can't.
I just did.
You're showing your bias by doing that.
No, I'm explaining to you
No,
why
you're
the
not.
legal theory.
You're basing it on
I'm
hypotheticals.
explaining to you why the
Then
legal
tell
theory that
me
you're using,
how
why the
many
legal
US
theory that
citizens
you're
have been
using. I know
deported.
you're scared. I know you want to address this
Oh,
point.
I'm not
Listen,
scared.
listen.
No, sir.
The legal theory you are proposing would allow all of our constitutional rights to be violated as long as we were sent off the court's jurisdiction before they found out. Because once we're off that jurisdiction, they have no more authority according to you.
Misinformation.
I'm not providing information.
you
It's called
are.
the thought experiment.
No.
You think?
I don't give
No?
statements based on that. No. You're twisting it. to
I'm not
justify
twisting it. It's a hypothetical.
Well, we don't deal in hypotheticals.
Let me explain something to you. If I was to come here and say, let me explain why what you're doing is so dishonest and how everyone can tell it's dishonest. If I was to come to you and say, I think that all pets should be deported, and then I say, this one cat, he should be deported. And you're like, wait a second, dogs are also pets. Shouldn't dogs be deported? And I'm like, no. Misinformation. You're lying. Fake news. Lib. You're saying to me, courts lose all jurisdiction once you're off U.S. soil. And that's why the courts cannot make Trump bring Abrego Garcia back. I'm
No,
saying,
they
wait a
can't.
second, under that logic, if a U.S. citizen was sent to El Salvador, we still couldn't bring him back because now they're off U.S. soil, and according to you, courts have no more
Your key
jurisdiction.
word is if. So you don't know what you're talking about.
Congratulations for discovering what a hypothetical is. Address it.
I just did. You don't agree with it.
No, you
That's your
actually
bias.
didn't even address it. It's one thing if I disagree, you didn't even address it.
No, you're saying that because you don't agree with it. So
You
that's where
said
you're
courts
wrong.
lose jurisdiction once you leave U.S. territory. That would apply to everyone, not just illegal immigrants.
District court judges, federal district court judges cannot change policy.
Okay, and according to
can't
you,
inject
if it's
their
off
own
U.S.
bias.
soil, it's foreign policy, right?
We're talking about immigration.
According
not
to you,
US
if it's off
citizens,
U.S. soil, it's foreign policy, right?
But they're no U.S. citizens.
You're not. You see how you keep running to a
How
different
many?
thing, which is not what I just said?
How many have been deported?
See how you
You're
keep running
right.
away to a different topic than what
No.
I'm saying?
I'm going based off what you said.
I never said anything about U.S. citizens
You
having
made a
actually been
hypothetical
deported.
about U.S. citizens.
Exactly. Now, do we know what a
Okay.
hypothetical is?
That is not what we're talking about.
Do you know how to
You're
engage with a
changing the
hypothetical?
conversation. I don't deal in hypotheticals.
Well, we're talking about hypotheticals
let's
because
get
when
past that.
courts make rulings, they test the principle by applying it in hypothetical situations and seeing what outcomes it brings us. That is how judicial review works. That is literally how it works. So if you're providing an opinion on the courts, I'm going to use that same framework to ask you a question.
And I just used yours.
No, you didn't.
Yes, I did.
What's my framework?
You're trying to justify Trump's removal.
I'm not trying to justify. I'm not even making an
immigrants to
argument.
US
I'm trying to
citizens.
clarify yours, and
You're trying to make
you
the
know
comparison.
that your argument looks bad, so you don't want to answer my question.
Oh, no. You're trying to use U.S. citizens to justify him not deporting immigrants.
I'm saying once you say that courts don't have jurisdiction once you're off the territory of the U.S., that's a very slippery slope because there's nothing preventing that from applying to U.S. citizens as well.
Well, people associated with T groups do not get due process, sir.
That's not what I just see how that's not what I just said, and you're just talking about a different thing right now.
Form of due process.
Someone said you're fighting a debate with hypotheticals and not using facts. I have a newsflash for everyone here. I have a newsflash for everyone here. The way courts work is they take a legal theory and they take a legal principle and then they apply it to different hypotheticals to come to a decision. And what this man has argued is that once you are off U.S. soil, courts no longer have any jurisdiction. My follow-up, very rational question is, okay, with that logic though, couldn't they just deport a U.S. citizen? And then as long as they did it before a court found out, when the court tells them, excuse me, sir, excuse me, Mr. Trump, you have to bring this citizen back. They'll say, no, you don't understand. They're not on U.S. soil anymore. This is not U.S. foreign policy. That is what you guys are arguing for.
It becomes
That's
foreign
your
policy
argument, not
outside
mine.
our country.
That's your argument.
It becomes foreign policy.
Okay.
Not district judges.
Exactly. So, okay, we're on the same page now. He's saying once you're off U.S. soil, it becomes foreign policy. So under that logic, doesn't matter if you're a citizen, an illegal immigrant, doesn't matter what you are. Once you're off U.S. soil, you can be used and abused by the U.S. government however they want. You no longer have any constitutional rights just because you're off U.S. soil. That is his argument. Thanks. I guess we've elucidated what the actual difference of opinion was there. This is what it always comes to with the Trump people. We actually agree. But you're afraid of saying it with your chest. Just say it with your chest. Just admit it. I don't think due process is important. I don't think that courts have authority. Just admit it. Then we can have the real honest debate, okay? Because these Trump debates always go the same way. I spend the first 99% of the conversation getting them to admit what their actual position is. They never want to admit what their actual position is because they know when you state it plainly and you don't use all these buzzwords to try to hide what you're saying, when you actually just state your position, it's a horrible look. You look like an authoritarian because you are an authoritarian. That's why you obfuscate and you run circles around it and you don't actually want to address what is it that you are arguing for.